Our speaker tonight is Derwin Mack, as you all know. Very interesting chat. I must say that, Derwin. You're over there. Derwin is a chartered professional accountant who held various positions in auditing, accounting, forensic accounting, which he pointed out was fraud investigation, and risk management in the small accounting firms and the provincial government. He is also a science fiction writer who has published 12 short stories and 2 novels, edited 2 anthologies, and won the Alberta Book Publishing Award and 2 Aurora Awards. Canada's national, the Aurora Award is Canada's National Award for Science Fiction. He is also interested in heraldry, history, and cosplaying. I have no idea what that is. He is also a St. John ambulance officer and a freeman of the City of London. This is interesting. A freeman is someone who has received the freedom of the City of London and hence has the right to herd sheep across London Bridge. I want to know how many times, Derwin, you've done that. Derwin has been collecting both stamps and comic books for most of his life. Of course, he collects stamps related to science fiction and comics themes. He had previously given the presentations on the Batman first day of issue ceremony and the Wonder Woman stamps at the North Toronto Stamp Club. His exhibit on Superman was shown at the virtual stamp show last month. I welcome you, Derwin. His subject is Superman.
Okay, Superman on stamps. Thanks for the introduction, Ken. And let's talk about Superman. So, Superman is one of the most famous fictional characters in the world. He's known all around the world, even up and including outside the English-speaking world. And the story of the creation of Superman, even though he's generally considered an American hero, really begins here in Toronto with a fellow named Joe Shuster, who was born here in Toronto and grew up to be an artist. Now, some of you may remember his first cousin, Frank Shuster, from the comedy team Wayne and Shuster. And Joe Shuster was born in Toronto. The city depicted on this 60-cent definitive stamp. Now, although Canada Post calls it the Toronto, Ontario street scene stamp, the scene is really based on a Toronto image. And on the official first day cover, Toronto's old City Hall shows up on the cachet. Now, when Joe Shuster was a young boy, he delivered newspapers for the Toronto Daily Star, the newspaper we now call the Toronto Star. Now here's an American stamp from 1952 in honor of America's newspaper boys. Now this is very typical of the type of stamp the United States used to issue in the 50s and 60s and even up to the 70s. There's a lot of different messages crammed into this one stamp. The Soviet Union wasn't the only country that issued propaganda stamps during the Cold War. So let's take a look at the stamp. Well, there is your paper boy. And his bag has the slogan, "Busy boys, better boys." Well, this was the 1950s, and at that time, parents were horribly worried that their children would grow up to be juvenile delinquents because they read comic books or listened to rock and roll, right? And if you remember, there were movies like Rebel Without a Cause and Reform Schoolgirl, which preyed on these parents' fears that their children would become juvenile delinquents. Right? And then there's another message over here. There's a hand holding a torch with the message "Free Enterprise" on it. Right? So we now know that newspaper publishing and being a paper boy are ways to participate in the capitalist system. Right? And there's a third message right in the middle of the stamp. In recognition of the important service rendered their communities and their nation by America's newspaper boys. So at a time before the internet and before everybody got a TV, newspapers were still, at that time, the most important method of mass communications. So this one stamp has several different themes crammed into 2 square inches. And so its big message is that newspaper boys are capitalists who fulfill a public duty by delivering newspapers so people can read about how to prevent their kids from becoming juvenile delinquents. right? So Joe Shuster had a relationship with the Toronto Star, right? Now, this would actually work its way into the Superman fiction. This is a postcard from the 1930s showing the old Toronto Star building. It's not the building that currently exists at 1 Yonge Street. This is the one that used to exist from the 1930s up to 1972 on King Street. In 1972, it was torn down, and now First Canadian Place stands in that location. But because Joe Shuster delivered newspapers for the Toronto Star, the newspaper that Superman works at has always looked like the Toronto Star, the old Toronto Star building throughout the decades, right? And in the early Superman stories, Clark Kent, Superman's alter ego, did not work at the Daily Planet. Instead, he worked at a newspaper called the Daily Star. And later it was renamed the Daily Planet. Right? On the left, you'll see there's a stamp, a Canadian stamp showing Superman flying over the Daily Planet building. So the Daily Planet building is the old Toronto Star building with the Daily Planet globe attached to the roof. Well, when he was about 9 or 10 years old, Joe Shuster and his family moved to Cleveland, Ohio. And in high school, he met another kid named Jerry Siegel. Right? And they quickly became friends. Both of them were sons of Jewish immigrants from Europe. Right? So Joe Shuster's father came from the Netherlands and his mother came from Ukraine. And Jerry Siegel's two parents were both Lithuanian Jews who were fleeing from an anti-Semitic pogrom going on in Lithuania. And they met in high school, and they were both very interested in comic books and science fiction. So of course they became friends. During World War II, Jerry Siegel joined the US Army, like many men did, and he became a writer for the US military newspaper Stars and Stripes. And he trained at Fort George G. Meade in Maryland. And here's a patriotic cover from postmarked at Fort George G. Meade in Maryland. And that type of cancellation with the oval-shaped or ovate-shaped killer bars is very typical of American post offices of the 1920s and 30s. Right? A lot of post offices had this type of cancellation. Sometimes it's nicknamed the football because of its shape. And that numeral in the center, depending on which post office you were in, it was either the number of the branch or it was a number assigned to a postal clerk. So there's a patriotic cover. Now, in 1933, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster collaborated to write and illustrate a science fiction story called Reign of the Superman, which was published in a fanzine or amateur science fiction magazine called Science Fiction. Right? And Reign of the Superman was about a supervillain with superpowers who tries to take over the world. And there's the first Superman, a bold, evil, villainous character. Well, later on, within the space of 5 years, they would turn their Superman into a hero. But the bold villain would become Lex Luthor, Superman's arch villain in the comic books and the movies. So over the next 5 years, they reimagined their character of Superman and made him into a superhero with superpowers who wore circus acrobat tights and a red cape. Right? And they shopped him around to different publishing companies and national periodical publications. One of the companies that would later merge with a few other companies and become DC Comics bought their story and published the first Superman story in Action Comics #1, June 1938. Now this is a very important comic book. It's the most valuable comic book in comic book fandom. It's generally regarded as being the start of the golden age of comics, and the last time a copy sold at auction, which was in 2014, it sold for over $3.2 million. Right? If People have asked me if I have a copy of it. No, I don't, but I do have the 1974 color reprint, which isn't as valuable. Okay, so Superman became an immediate success in the new medium of comic books. In fact, he was so much of an influence on American pop culture that when the United States Postal Service selected important events of the 20th century for its Celebrate the Century series in the 1990s, it chose Superman as being one of the important events of the 1930s. And here is the stamp from the Celebrate the Century series. And the official first day of issue city for the 1930s related stamps of Celebrate the Century was Cleveland, Ohio, the city where Joe Shuster met Jerry Siegel. Right. So Superman was not the first comic book character with superpowers, and he wasn't the first comic book character who was a hero, but he is considered to be the first modern comic book superhero. So what makes a modern comic book superhero? Well, first he's got to have a distinctive costume, which Superman has, and he's got to have a superpower, or in Superman's case, several superpowers. Now I know Batman is an exception. Batman doesn't have superpowers, but he compensates by being super wealthy and being able to afford all those gadgets and a great car that gives him a lot of, that compensates for the superpowers. Right? And the modern comic book superhero has a secret identity. So when Superman isn't Superman, he's got an alter ego as Clark Kent, the mild-mannered reporter for the Daily Planet, or before that, the Daily Star. Right? And the modern comic book superhero also has an altruistic mission. In Superman's case, he fights for truth, justice, and the American way. And this is what made Superman very appealing to the American public in the late 1930s. To people coming out of the Depression, he became an immediate hit. Think of all the other people who have had superpowers in folklore, myth, and legend and fiction through the centuries. Think of Gilgamesh or Hercules or Siegfried or King Arthur and Merlin. They all had superpowers. They were all very special people, but most of them used their superpowers to maintain their status as kings or demigods, and they used their superpowers for adventure or just keeping on the throne, right? And they wanted to maintain their status as kings, emperors, and demigods. But Superman was different. He didn't want to be treated as a god or a king. He just wanted to be an ordinary newspaper reporter, a guy you could meet on the street, right? And so to the American public coming out of the Great Depression and looking as if they could be entering World War II, he became the symbol of an ordinary person who can do great things. And he appealed to people who wished they could do great things during times of crises and during the Great Depression and as Europe was slipping into World War II. Through the decades, artists have used him to symbolize the ordinary person who does extraordinary things during a crisis. This is a picture by Alex Roth of Superman at 9/11. In this case, it's Superman who regards the ordinary people of 9/11 as being the real heroes of the event. Right? And here's a more recent picture by Malcolm Mays of the Edmonton Journal showing Superman giving the symbols of his superhero status, the red cape and the Superman logo, which is also the logo of the Kryptonian clan of the House of El, to a healthcare worker during the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's why Superman has become so popular. He's the symbol of us if we could do great things. Superman also tapped into a lot of archetypes in Western culture, right? There's a lot of Jewish religious influences in Superman. Remember that Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel were the sons of Jewish immigrants. He's from the House of El. That's the name of his clan on Krypton. But that word is derived from, hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Elohim, which is a Hebrew word for of the gods, right? This is a very interesting postmark. It's from Naples, Italy. It's a cancel for the 80th anniversary of Superman, and there in the center is the Superman logo, or the symbol of the House of El. Right? The other Jewish religious influence on the Superman legend is that his origin story is similar to that of Moses. Both of them were set adrift by their parents to save them from a disaster. Both of them were adopted and raised by another family, and both of them came back to become heroes. Right? So here's a stamp showing Moses from the African kingdom of Lesotho. Now what's interesting is that this is an Easter issue, and I always thought Moses is really related to Passover as opposed to Easter, because Easter is about the death and resurrection of Jesus. So I don't know why Moses is on an Easter stamp, other than that the Last Supper of Jesus was a Passover dinner. But whatever the reason, there is Moses on an Easter stamp from an African kingdom. Okay. Superman also appealed to Americans because he represents the immigrant success story. He arrived from the planet Krypton as a refugee, but then he was adopted by a very, middle-class American couple in Kansas, probably the most, plain, ordinary American Goyish place possible, right? And he grew up as a Kansas farm boy. I mean, what could be more American, right? And so for a lot of Americans, he represented the immigrant success story. And he was possibly the first comic book character who was an immigrant, who was well respected. Before him, immigrants did show up in comic strips and comic books, but they were typically either comic relief characters, or they were racial stereotypes, or they were villains. Right? Here's a cover made by Fleetwood for a series of covers that it sold to collectors in the 1980s, commemorating great events of American history. And this one is for the anniversary of the first immigrants to Ellis Island. Right? The cachet art is by Mort Kunstler, who was popular at the time for his paintings of events of American history. And it's quite likely that Joe Shuster's and Jerry Siegel's parents passed through Ellis Island as they came over from Europe. So here's another cover that emphasizes that Superman is the immigrant success story. This is for one of the Canadian stamps from 2013, and it's made by Isidore Baum of Montreal. Some of you may have met him at the stamp shows. He also does business as Wonderful World of Stamps. Right? So let's look at the fictional history of Superman, right? And there have been variations of it over the years, but typically most of them begin with the destruction of the planet Krypton. Right? So let's talk about his parents, Jor-El and Lara. Jor-El is a famous Kryptonian scientist, and for years he's been warning the Kryptonian government and his fellow scientists that their planet will explode sometime, and that their best bet for survival is to build a fleet of spaceships and evacuate all of them to another planet. However, nobody listens to him, no one believes him. And then the planet starts to erupt and the planet is going to explode. Jor-El hasn't had any resources or time to build a whole fleet of spaceships to evacuate the whole planet, but he has had time to build a single seater spaceship. So he puts his baby son Kal-El aboard the ship and launches him towards planet Earth. Planet Earth seems relatively civilized, even though our civilization is somewhat backwards compared to that of the Kryptonians, and it has a yellow sun. And if Kryptonians absorb the radiation from the yellow sun, they will get superpowers. So Jor-El is reasonably assured that his son will grow up with very few health problems. Now, when he lands on Earth, his ship crashes in Kansas, where he's adopted by Jonathan and Martha Kent, who see the ship crash. They give him the new name Clark Kent, and they raise him as a Kansas farm boy. Here's a cancellation from Hutchinson, Kansas in 2015. Once a year, the town council of Hutchinson, Kansas renames itself Smallville, and they hold a comic book convention there called the Smallville Comic-Con. And that cancellation shows the spaceship, Kal-El's spaceship, as it looked in the 1978 Superman movie starring Christopher Reeve. Right. Alas, I wrote to the organizers of the Smallville Comic-Con, and they think this was the only year their post office bothered with pictorial cancel. So I mentioned Clark Kent grows up as a farm boy in Kansas. And here's a scene from the TV series Smallville showing Clark Kent and his high school girlfriend, Lana Lang, sitting atop a windmill. Kansas is filled with windmills, so of course, one of the windmills shows up on this US stamp celebrating the 150th anniversary of the statehood of Kansas. Now, when he grows up, Clark Kent moves to Metropolis, right, which is really New York with another name. And there he gets a job as a reporter for the Daily Planet. Right. Now, this cancellation is one of a group of cancellations that US postmasters could order in July 2006. In July 2006, the United States issued a pane or sheetlet of stamps depicting the DC comic book superheroes, right? And they were issued at the San Diego Comic-Con, of course, and they went on sale throughout the nation the next day, July 22nd. There were several different and postmasters could order cancellations, all conforming to a certain type, showing the DC comic book superheroes. And the postmaster of Kodiak, Alaska, ordered this cancellation in conjunction with a comic book convention going on in his city at that time. So this shows Superman flying over Metropolis, and there, as usual, the building with the big globe on top of it is the Daily Planet building. Now, I went through the postal bulletin and I counted 16 cities plus the Museum of Comics and Cartoon Art in New York City that ordered cancellations showing the DC superheroes. They had a choice of Superman or Wonder Woman or Batman or the Flash or Green Lantern, right? 16 cities, well, actually 17 if you count the Museum of Comic and Cartoon Art, ordered cancellations. Of those 17, 13 of them used Superman on the cancel. The Museum of Comic and Cartoon Art Station in New York actually used all 5 superheroes under cancels. Right? So this is popular for a while. Now, in Metropolis, Superman finds the love of his life, Lois Lane. All his girlfriends have the initials LL. So in high school, it's Lana Lang, and then in Metropolis, it's Lois Lane. There was a time when he went into the ocean and he met a girl named Lori Lemaris, who was a mermaid, right? So they all have the LL initials. So Lois Lane is a reporter, and that's why I include the Freedom of the Press stamp in my exhibit. And she also won the Pulitzer Prize in the comic books. There is no US stamp that commemorates the Pulitzer Prize directly, but there is a stamp from 1947 showing Joseph Pulitzer. There he is. Right. Well, for about 2 decades, from the 30s to the 50s, Superman was the sole survivor of Krypton. But in the 1950s, the comic book editors decided they wanted to add more people from Krypton, right? So soon the comic books filled up with even more survivors of Krypton, all with amazingly complicated origin stories. The most notable of these survivors is Supergirl, Superman's cousin from the city Argo City. Now, when Krypton exploded, one chunk of the planet was big enough that it could contain the whole city, Argo City. And depending on which version of the story you read, there was either a plastic bubble over it, or by luck, they got an air pocket all around the chunk of the planet, right? But over the years, Argo City became uninhabitable because radiation was seeping up from the surface. So Jor-El's brother, launches his teenage daughter, Kara, towards Earth. And when she arrives at Earth, she meets Superman and assumes the identity of Supergirl, a superheroine in her own right. Then she also gets adopted by an American couple in the town of Midvale, which is in the middle of nowhere, and assumes the secret identity of Linda Lee Danvers, right? Although she's Kara Danvers in the TV show. Supergirl shows up on her own 2 stamps as well. So on the left, and Supergirl has also changed her costume frequently throughout the history of comic books. On the left is her original costume from the 1950s, which is essentially a skater dress version of Superman's costume. And on the right is the 1970s costume that she wore with the hot pants or the short shorts, which some comic book collectors have nicknamed the cocktail waitress costume. The cachet is interesting. For some reason, the Postal Commemorative Society, which made cachet, which got its cachets made by Artcraft, thought it would be a good idea to put the least popular Supergirl costume on its cachet. This was the costume from the early 1980s, and it was during the big aerobics fad. And Supergirl's wearing that aerobics sweatband around her head, like in the Olivia Newton-John music video, right? It was so unpopular with comic book collectors that the artist took it away after a few issues. But the rest of the costume, including the red skirt, stayed and became the most popular of all the Supergirl costumes. It lasted from the 80s up until earlier this year, when she got a new costume. Now, different countries have different cultures and different traditions, right? We all know that. The same goes for the stamp collectors or philatelists who live in those countries. I've noticed that philatelists and collectors in different countries have their own customs and traditions on what to collect and how to collect. And the United States is no exception to having its own philatelic culture or traditions. I've noticed that Americans have a do-it-yourself culture. I mean, American stamp collectors have a do-it-yourself culture. In Canada and the UK and Europe, we tend to emphasize collecting postal history, which is items that have gone through the mail in the legitimate course of business or regular correspondence. We don't put a greatest emphasis on items which we consider philatelic or made especially for collectors or tourists for each other, right? But Americans just love creating their own covers and items for each other or for tourists or for themselves. So when in Rome, do as the Romans do. When I was visiting New York last year, I made this cover to commemorate the Adventures of Superman radio series, which ran from 1940 to 1951, right? This was back when radio drama was big. And it starred Bud Collyer as Superman, Joan Alexander as Lois Lane, and Jason Beck as the announcer. And I got it hand canceled at the Bryant Station, which is a post office near Times Square. I wrote in one of this year's issues of PhilaJournal about the ordeal of going to Bryant Station and having the bad luck of getting served by a postal clerk who didn't even recognize that stamp as being a legitimate stamp, despite it being on a first issues poster hanging on the wall, right? New issues poster hanging right on the wall behind him. Okay. So it was the radio show that first used this famous introduction. Up in the sky, look, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman, right? Which can all be illustrated by different stamps. Now, Superman made his first appearance in movies in a series of short animated films from 1941 to 1943, made by Max Fleischer and Paramount Studios. It's amazing how much of the early history of Superman was created by Jewish guys who loved comic books and cartoons. Max Fleischer was a Polish Jewish immigrant who came to the United States, became an American, and got to work in animation in the movie industry. He invented the rotoscope, which was a tool where you could use filmed images of real people and trace those images and transfer them to film as animated characters, right? So Max, it was a very important device for making cartoons. As I mentioned, Americans have a do-it-yourself culture. They love making their own first day covers. So I made this first day cover showing Max Fleischer and Superman from the films. I used Photoshop to combine several images, and I used the Hanukkah stamp and first day cover to honor Max Fleischer's Jewish heritage. In the United States, they have several different stamps per year related to holidays like Cinco de Mayo and Kwanzaa and Christmas and Hanukkah and Eid. They do double duty. They not only celebrate certain religious festivals, but they also honor certain ethnic groups as well. Now, the animated films had their own introduction, which became famous, and it's faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. This amazing stranger from the planet Krypton, the Man of Steel, Superman. Right? Now, it's interesting. Up until this time, Superman did not fly. In the comic books and in the early Max Fleischer films, he just jumped long distances over buildings in Metropolis. But Max Fleischer thought this looked ridiculous in animation, so he gave Superman the ability to fly, and it looked much more dramatic. And then the comic books adopted this ability to fly, and then, of course, that became part of the Superman tradition in the movies and other media. Superman made his first appearance as a live action movies in 1948 in the movie serial Superman, and he showed up again 2 years later in a serial called Adam Man versus Superman. These starred Kirk Alyn as Superman. Movie serials, okay. Possibly some of you may remember what a movie serial is. They were short films, often between 10 and in series of 10 to 12 short films, and each of them was one chapter of the story. And you went to the movie theater to see one chapter of the movie serial and the feature movie. And then you went back the next week to see another chapter of the serial, right? And another movie, right? And this you went back week after week until you saw all the chapters of the movie serial, right? This type of storytelling has been largely replaced by television since the 1950s, right? So Superman was in 2 movie serials, and Americans have a do-it-yourself culture in philately. Indeed, the American philatelist do-it-yourself culture even extends to making their own postmarks. In the United States, you can apply to your local postmaster for a permit to cancel your own mail, right? And that's called the mailer's postmark permit. Originally, this was used so that people with a lot of mail, like publishing companies or people who send out a lot of advertisements, could cancel their own mail and thereby save time that the post office would have used canceling the mail and then get the mail out to their customers faster. But it did not take very long for stamp collectors to realize that this is a way they could create their own postmarks and cancel their own covers, right? So lots of stamp collectors in the United States asked their postmasters for a mailer's postmark permit, create their own postmarks, and start making their own first day covers and covers with their canceling devices. I applied for, you don't even have to live in a certain city to get that city's mailer's postmark permit. What you need is for the postmaster to actually realize what a mailer's postmark permit is, because that's one of the most obscure parts of the postal manual, and a lot of them don't know what it is, right? I applied to Los Angeles Post Office 90052 in downtown Los Angeles for a mailer's postmark permit because I'm frequently in Los Angeles for a sci-fi convention. And much to my surprise, I got the permit. So I might be one of the few, if not only, Canadians to get a mailer's postmark permit from Los Angeles 90052 or anywhere in Los Angeles. So I use this mailer's postmark permit canceling device to create covers on movie themes, such as this one. Okay, and here's another aspect of the do-it-yourself culture of American philatelists. They like to make their own first day covers, and they have different ways of making first day covers. And if you ever hear an American philatelist refer to something called a paste-on cachet, this is one of them. Sometimes they'll get an uncached first day cover, design a cachet, print it on a piece of paper, cut it out, and paste it onto the cover, which is what I did with this cover. It's the Greetings from Minnesota stamp. And Noah O'Neill, the first actress to play Lois Lane, was born in Minnesota, so I made up this design and put it on a paste-up cover for this first day cover of the Minnesota stamp. Noah O'Neill played Lois Lane in the Superman series, and then she came back in the 1950s to play Lois Lane again in the TV series starring George Reeves. Okay. So, in 1952, Superman made his first appearance on television in The Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves. For many of us, he was probably our first Superman. He was my first Superman. George Reeves played Stuart Tarleton, one of the two twins who pesters Scarlett O'Hara to go to the barbecue with them in the first scene of Gone with the Wind, a movie which is commemorated in this 1990 stamp honoring great American movies of the year 1939. Okay. Now, of all the Supermen, George Reeves has the closest connection to philately because he starred in a short film called Stamp Day for Superman, and you can actually see this on YouTube now. We're talking about the edge of philately or the back of the book stamps. Well, Superman helps sell those to children in schools. Stamp Day for Superman is a short film where Superman encourages children to buy U.S. Department of Treasury savings stamps from the U.S. Post Office. Now, what are Treasury savings stamps? Well, here are the Treasury savings stamps from 1954 to 1957. They were a way to buy U.S. savings bonds. Let's say you did not have enough money to buy a U.S. savings bond, but you really wanted to buy one, right? What you did was you went to the post office or to a Treasury Department office if you could get to one, and you bought one of these savings stamps. So let's say you bought the $1 savings stamp. Then you moistened it and pasted it into a folder, right, provided by the post office. When you had accumulated and pasted in 10 of these $1 stamps, their denominations would add up to $10. So then you would take that folder with the stamps back to either the post office or the Treasury Department, and they would give you the $10 U.S. savings bond, right? So you could do that with any of these stamps, and as long as you accumulate the right denomination, you could get a savings bond. So Superman helped sell savings stamps to children so that they could learn how to save money and lend money to the United States government. Okay. In 1978, Christopher Reeve starred in a Superman movie, right? Superman, also known as Superman the movie, and this is arguably the first of the modern comic book superhero movies. Extremely high budget, had a cast of supporting actors who were superstars like Marlon Brando, for example, and it became very successful. Even though today the superhero movie market is dominated by the Marvel Comics movies like the Avengers and Captain America and Thor, they owe their start to their competitor, DC Comics. Right? So here's a first day cover with a cachet showing George Reeve as Superman. This one too is made by Isidore Baum in Montreal. Okay. Now, for us Canadians, the 1978 Superman has a Canadian connection. The Kansas scenes were filmed in Alberta, right? So in the center is a scene from the movie showing teenage Clark Kent racing against a train. And that scene is almost completely replicated in the 1974 Rural America stamp, showing a train driving through a Kansas wheat field. And on the right is a Canadian stamp showing an Alberta wheat field. Now here's another Canadian connection to the 1978 Superman movie. Margot Kidder, the actress who played Lois Lane, was Canadian. She was born in Yellowknife, the city commemorated in this 1984 stamp. And here's a photograph of Margot Kidder when I met her at the Motor City Comic Con in 2004. Motor City is near Novi, Detroit, near Detroit, Novi, Michigan, near Detroit. Okay. Canada's connections to the Superman franchise continued later on. There was a TV series called Smallville, which was about teenage Clark Kent. And in that one, Vancouver filled in as Kansas, right? It was cheaper to film in Vancouver, so it was shot over there, right? And many of us are familiar with this $1 definitive stamp from 1973 showing Vancouver, right? Now, Smallville takes place in a universe where Lex Luthor, Superman's arch villain, becomes president of the United States, right? In the very last episode of Smallville, he gets elected president. And in that universe, there was a presidential election in the year 2018, right? Which we know didn't happen in the real world. So I figured that Lex Luthor's inauguration would take place on January 20th, 2019. So using my mailer's postmark permit, I made an inauguration cover for President Lex Luthor. Americans have a tradition called the inauguration cover. They make commemorative covers on the inauguration day of their new president, right? And it's autographed by Michael Rosenbaum, the actor who played Lex Luthor in Smallville. I met him last year at Fan Expo Canada. Okay. And Vancouver's connections to Superman continue to this day. Superman's cousin, Supergirl, has her own TV series, and that's filmed in Vancouver. It will be filmed in Vancouver again once they restart filming after the COVID pandemic. And here's another stamp showing Vancouver, issued for the 125th anniversary of British Columbia becoming a province. Now let's look at the town of Metropolis, Illinois, which despite its name of Metropolis has only about 3,500 people in it. For years, Metropolis, Illinois has held something called the Superman Celebration, basically a comic book convention every June. And for years, its local post office has had a Superman Celebration cancellation. Now, this is an example of where philatelic research of modern material can actually be sometimes more challenging than researching older material. Philatelists like to research older cancellations and older material, but objects which are considered modern or philatelic, that is made for collectors or tourists, don't get as much attention. So sometimes it's harder to find information about modern philatelic material that's made for collectors or tourists. And these Superman Celebration cancels definitely fall into that category. This is the earliest one I can find, which is from 1979, but I don't know if there were others before that because the United States Postal Bulletins that I can download from the USPS website only started the year 2001, right? Also, running to the postmaster in Metropolis, Illinois hasn't really turned up much information. I never got a reply, and a lot of these postmasters really weren't around during the 1970s or 80s or 90s. Some of them don't know what happened in the past. And of course, local postmasters don't always keep good records of what canceling devices they had, 4 decades ago, right? So these cancels are a challenge to research. my next steps will be to contact the American Philatelic Society library and see if they got old issues of Lynn Stamp News, and also to see if the USPS can get me old issues of the Postal Bulletin from before the internet age. Right, so here are more cancels from Metropolis, Illinois. Right, so you can see Superman and the Superman logo on them. Okay. So those are the cancels and postmarks. Superman made his first appearance on a stamp in 1995 in this booklet issued by Canada Post for the comic book superheroes of Canada. Now, most of these superheroes are undoubtedly Canadian, like Nelvana, Queen of the Northern Lights, Captain Canuck, Fleur de Lis, and Johnny Canuck. Superman, though, I never considered to be a Canadian superhero. I mean, he lives in the United States. He was published by an American company. He's created by two guys from Cleveland, Ohio. He fights for truth, justice, and the American way. But Canada Post and the Canadian organization Historia Canada say he's a Canadian superhero. Well, they say so because Joe Shuster was from Toronto, Ontario, but he moved to Cleveland, Ohio when he was 9 or 10 years old and made up Superman when he was in Cleveland. But nonetheless, we have adopted Superman as one of ours, and he shows up on Canadian stamps now. And here is the cover of the booklet. Okay. And here's the official first day cover of the stamps from the booklet. And the cachet shows another Canadian superhero, Northgard. This particular first day cover is autographed by, in the center, Richard Cumley, the creator of Captain Canuck, and Janet Hetherington and Ron Sutton, the two artists who designed the first day cover, and also wrote and designed the back of the first day cover, which has a little history of Canadian comic books and superheroes. And here are Ron and Janet at Fan Expo Canada, our country's largest comic book convention, held every year in Toronto, well, except for this year, in 2017. Now, Janet Hetherington, her connections to Canada Post and comic books goes back for decades. Not only did she design this first day cover, but she also used to edit a publication for young stamp collectors for Canada Post. And her connections to comic books goes back even further. This is the costume contest or masquerade of Maplecon, an Ottawa science fiction convention back in 1986, right? And here in the corner, wearing the gold headdress, is Janet Hetherington cosplaying as Superman's mother, Lara, right? As shown in the comic book Man of Steel, which came out in 1986. And look over here. That's me in the white construction helmet cosplaying as an engineer from the Soviet nuclear power plant at Chernobyl, which was big news back in 1986. Right? So that's what cosplaying is, dressing up as a science fiction or comic book character. Okay. Superman's next appearance on a stamp came in 1988 as part of the United States Celebrate the Century series. The official first day of issue ceremony for the 1930s related stamps was Cleveland, Ohio. But the postmaster of Metropolis, Illinois could not let this chance pass without having his own first day of issue canceled, because after all, Metropolis is the city of Superman. So the Metropolis post office obtained this cancel and used it on first day covers, right? And this first day cover was created by a company called Pugh Cachets, which was run by the late Julian Pugh and his wife Sharon Pugh in Woodlands, Texas. It used art by Paul R. Stewart. American first day cover collectors not only collect their first day covers by cancellation and city, they also collect them by cover artist and cover creator. Right? They have a whole first day cover collecting culture down there, which is much more complex and involved than our first day cover culture. Right? And Superman made his next appearance on stamps in 2006 on this pane or sheet of stamps showing the DC comic book superheroes. So here's Superman up here. Here he is again. And his cousin Supergirl shows up on this stamp and this stamp down here. Now, these stamps were self-adhesive, so they have backing paper, and the back of the backing paper had descriptions of the superheroes. So here are the Superman-related stamps and their backing paper with descriptions of Superman and Supergirl. These stamps were issued at the San Diego Comic-Con, of course, San Diego. San Diego Comic-Con being the largest of the Comic-Cons in the world. And this is the black and white first day cancellation for the issue. Now, since the 2000s, the United States Postal Service has also used what they call digital color postmarks. And these are color cancellations that are laser printed onto the first day cover at the stamp fulfillment service in the underground cave in Kansas City, Missouri. Right? If you ever hear American collectors refer to the cave or the caves, they're referring to the stamp fulfillment service in Kansas City. That's where they create the first day covers, and that's where they have the canceling devices. Right? So there's the DCP for the DC Superheroes set. Now, Superman made another appearance on stamps in 2013 from Canada for the 75th anniversary of Superman. And on the surface, this seems like a rather simple issue. There are 6 designs, right, if you include the Coil stamp. There's a booklet, and there's 5 postal cards. But when you look at it more closely, it's actually a bit more complicated. There's actually a gum variety, a backing paper variety, 5 different booklet layouts, and not 5 postal cards. There's actually 10 postal cards. So I'll explain how all these different varieties exist. The most simple item in the issue is the souvenir sheet. So here's the first day cover of the souvenir sheets showing 5 designs of Superman over the decades, right? And the 6th design is the Coil stamp showing the cover from the Man of Steel comic book from 1986, drawn by John Byrne, right? If you bought the Coil stamp at the post office, if you bought a coil of them, the backing paper had a message in the Kryptonian language on the back, right? And Kryptonian is actually a language you can translate into English. There's actually a guide for translating Kryptonian into English. And it translates to the S shield is more than Superman's family crest. It's a Kryptonian symbol that means hope. However, if you got the Coil stamp from the quarterly packs or the annual collections that Canada Post sells to collectors, that stamp doesn't have the Kryptonian writing on the backing paper. The backing paper is blank, right? So here's a backing paper variety that Canada Post did not tell anyone about, and collectors discovered it. And the stamp with no printing on the backing paper has its own catalog number, the Unitrade catalog of Canadian stamps. Okay, so let's take a look at the booklets. Well, on the surface, every booklet of these stamps shows stamps with the same 5 designs that were on the souvenir sheet. And all the stamps are in the same combination and configuration on every booklet that you purchased at the post office. But since the booklets are self-adhesive, arguably they might or might not be a gum variety in relation to the souvenir sheet. But what definitely does constitute a variety is caused by these 4 non-postal stickers at the bottom of the booklet pane. Every booklet has 4 non-postal stickers depicting either the Daily Planet or Superman logo, but there were 5 different combinations of these stickers, right? And each of these combinations got its own booklet cover depicting a comic book from the past, right? So the booklets with this comic book image showing the cover of Superman #1 from 1939 got this combination of stickers. And these are two other booklet covers, and they got these combinations of stickers. And another two booklet covers got these combinations of stickers. So if you want to get the complete collection of all the different types of non-postal stickers that were included in the booklets, you had to collect 5 different booklets, each with its own comic book cover on them. Now, before we move to the postal cards, let's look at the first day of issue cancel. The Canada Post used this cancellation on its official first day covers of the souvenir sheet. So it shows the Superman or House of L logo, and the postmark city is Toronto, Ontario, of course, the hometown of Joe Shuster. There are no official first day covers for the booklet stamps, but individual collectors and dealers could ask for this cancellation on their own covers if they sent them to the National Philatelic Center. This is the cancellation used on the first day covers of the Coil stamp, and it's very unusual because the postmark city is Metropolis, a city that does not exist in Canada, right? There is no metropolis in any province of Canada. Now, interestingly, this is not the first time that Canada Post has used a fictional city on a postmark. This is the second time. The first time was for the Anne of Green Gables issue in 2008, when all the first day covers got 2 postmarks, one from Cavendish, Prince Edward Island, which really exists, and one from Avonlea, PEI, which does not exist except in the Anne of Green Gables stories, right? Although this is the first time that the covers got the postmark from only the fictional city, right? I don't know if any other country in the world would ever do something like this, you know, have a postmark for a fictional city, but Canada does. And here's the Coil Stamp's official first day cover, autographed by the actors Jack O'Halloran and Sarah Douglas, who played the Kryptonian supervillains Non and Ursa in the Superman movies. Okay, all right, the postal cards. On the surface, the postal cards have 5 indicia. That's the stamp-like image that denotes prepaid postage on the message side of the cards, right? So you look at the postal cards, you see 5 indicia, and you think, okay, I can collect 5 cards. But in actuality, there are 10 cards because Canada Post issued them in 2 sets of 5. One set they called the stamp images cards, and the other set they called the cover images cards. The difference being is that on the stamp images cards, the picture sides of the cards had pictures that resembled the indicium on the message side of the card. And on the cover images card, the picture side had a comic book cover on them, right? So let's take a look at the 5 cover images cards. One of the indiciums shows Superman, drawn by Joe Shuster, and on the picture side is Superman issue #1. So you see the images are related, right? Another one of the cards shows Superman, drawn by Kenneth Rocafort, and on the picture side is the comic book cover from which that image comes from. Now, this particular example is autographed by Tyler Hoechlin, the actor who plays Superman in the Supergirl TV series and the upcoming TV series Superman and Lois. Right? Now, and then the cover images start deviating from the indicium on the other side of the card. So the indicium showing Superman, drawn by Wayne Boring, got paired up with a cover also drawn by Joe Shuster, but not one drawn by Wayne Boring. Now this one's interesting. Here is Superman in the indicium in art drawn by Jim Lee showing Superman flying over the Daily Planet building. And Jim Lee did provide the art for one of the comic book images that shows up on the cards, but instead of pairing up the Jim Lee indicium with Jim Lee's comic book cover art, Canada Post paired it up with Johnny Byrne's cover for Man of Steel #1. Right? And this particular card is autographed by Tom Welling, the actor who played Clark Kent in the TV series Smallville. And this is Jim Lee's art for a Superman comic book, but it got paired up with the indicium showing Neil Adams' art of Superman bursting out of his kryptonite chains. Neil Adams is more famous for drawing Batman, but he did draw Superman too. And this particular card is autographed by Brandon Routh, the actor who played Superman in Superman Returns. Okay. That same year, 2013, Jersey got into the Superman stamps too. And these are the most gimmicky Superman stamps you'll ever find. Each of these stamps has some sort of weird production gimmick. So the 45 pence issue has a secret code on it, and if you scan it, if you download an app called SmartC and scan it with your smartphone, you can watch a video interview with Henry Cavill, the actor who played Superman. And the reason why Jersey wanted to issue a set of Superman stamps is because Henry Cavill was originally from Jersey, right? Unfortunately, I can't find that SmartC app on the iPhone app store anymore, so I can't watch the video. Okay. The 55 pence issue was printed on transparent material. So when you peel it away from backing paper, it's transparent except for the image of Superman and the denomination and the head of Queen Elizabeth, right? And that represents his X-ray vision, right? The 60 pence stamp is hard to see after it's been scanned, but it's a dark image printed on silver foil showing Henry Cavill's chest with the Superman logo on it. And that represents Superman's strength. And the 68 pence stamp it's printed on a thermochromic ink. So if you apply heat to it, the Earth appears above Superman, right? The 80 pence stamp has a very unusual gimmick to it. Henry Cavill grew up on Jersey, and the Jersey post office and the stamp printers asked him, "What's your favorite place on Jersey?" And he said it was Beauport Bay. So they got a pebble from Beauport Bay, crushed it, and put a microscopic particle of the pebble in each of the stamps in the 80 pence denomination, right? And the 88 pence stamp has a glow-in-the-dark message. So if you put it in the darkness and take it into a room and switch off the lights, a message appears in green ink. And the message is, "You will give the people an ideal to strive towards. They will race behind you. They will stumble. They will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders. Jor-El." That's the speech that Jor-El reads to his baby Kal-El before he launches him to Earth. And unfortunately, I don't read that line as well as Russell Crowe did in Man of Steel. Okay. Jersey also had a souvenir sheet. It was one of those plastic souvenir sheets printed with the lenticular image. So if you tilt it, you can see Superman flying. Here's the first day cover of the Jersey Superman stamps. And here's the first day cover of the souvenir sheet. Australia also got into the Superman stamps with this 2016 issue showing using its personalized stamp format. Actually, calling them personalized stamps is a bit of a misnomer because it's actually the label beside the stamp that gets the personalized image. But Australia's post office put these comic book covers beside its stamps. And it had another sheet showing Superman in the labels. In 2018, for the 80th anniversary of Superman, it issued another sheet of personalized stamps with Superman in the labels. And just this year, Portugal started issuing stamps showing the DC comic book characters. They didn't all come out at once. They came out at different times during the year 2020. And Portugal also used the personalized stamp format. So it issued this booklet of stamps with 4 images of Superman. And Portugal also issued what they call a collector's sheet with the 4 stamps. The other characters were Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, and 2 of the villains, Joker and Harley Quinn. This is the Portuguese first day cover of the Superman stamps. And just a few weeks ago in August, Portugal issued its Justice League issue showing Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, and Cyborg. And there was a souvenir sheet as well. Now, here's something I want to show people. There are bogus or fake Superman stamps. These are not forgeries because they don't copy an existing or approved design. These are completely fictitious designs allegedly from real countries. So here's a bogus set allegedly from the Republic of Benin. And you can tell it's fake right away because the English at the top, Superman the movies with an apostrophe S, doesn't really make any sense, right? Here's one allegedly from the Central African Republic. Okay? And another one allegedly from the Central African Republic showing Christopher Reeve as Superman. Right? And here's another Central African Republic bogus souvenir sheet showing Henry Cavill as Superman and Amy Adams as Lois Lane. And when the Batman versus Superman movie came out, whoever was making these couldn't resist making a souvenir showing Ben Affleck as Batman and Henry Cavill as Superman. And just so Wonder Woman wasn't left out, he made one with Wonder Woman in one of the stamps too, as played by Gal Gadot in the movies. Now, this has got to be the most bizarre fake stamp object I've ever found related to any comic book character. This is the genuine first day of issue cancellation for the Wonder Woman issue. But somebody made a fake cancellation based on the real one and removed the words first day of issue from the top, right? And not only that, applied it onto a Supergirl stamp on a cover with a cachet showing a scene from the Supergirl TV series starring Melissa Benoist. So I don't know why anyone would make this cover, would make this fake cancel and make this cover, but someone did for some reason. So every time I give one of these presentations, someone will always ask me, did you ever meet any of the actors in real life? And indeed I did. So I met the first Lois Lane, Noah O'Neill, at the San Diego Comic-Con in 2008. There she is, after receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Comic Book Fans of America. Right? And I did meet Sarah Douglas, the villainous Kryptonian supervillain Ursa, at the Motor City Comic-Con in 2019. And also there was her colleague, Non, played by Jack O'Halloran, right? Who had to leave the convention early because he was being admitted to the Wrestling Hall of Fame. Okay? I did meet Tom Welling, Clark Kent from Smallville, last year at the Ottawa Comic Con. And that's me in cosplaying as the Doctor from Doctor Who. Right? Michael Rosenbaum, Lex Luthor, arch-villain and president of the United States in Smallville, or Earth 167, because they have alternate universes on television. I met him at the Fan Expo in 2019. Okay, Supergirl, played by Laura Vandervoort in the Smallville TV series. Now there she is at Fan Expo Canada, and there I am meeting her and cosplaying as the prisoner number 6 from the British TV series The Prisoner, right? And Brandon Routh, whom I also met at Motor City Comic Con. He played Superman in Superman Returns, and he also plays Ray Palmer, the Atom, in the TV series Legends of Tomorrow. And Tyler Hoechlin, who plays Superman in the Supergirl TV series and is getting his own series, Supergirl and Superman and Lois. I saw him at Fan Expo as well. And there I am meeting Scott Edelman, a comic book writer. He used to work for Marvel, but he moved over to DC in the 1970s, and he wrote 2 Supergirl stories. And here I am getting him to autograph the cover at the World Science Fiction Convention in Dublin. Scott and I are regulars at the World Science Fiction Convention. And this is the cover I got him to autograph. Yet another example of American do-it-yourself philately. So that's my presentation on Superman. Thank you for listening to me.
Derwin, I would like to thank you on behalf of all our members. It was quite an interesting talk. The Canadian connection, I didn't know that Lana Lang was a girlfriend. I mean, and I grew up in the 40s, so some of this stuff I should have learned. Maybe it's old age setting in. Just the detail with the hairband of the Supergirl. I mean, the detail and the knowledge that you have on this subject is just mind-boggling. And you're to be commended on that. I really enjoyed the story. And thank you.